a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine?
Welcome to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. And thank you for joining me here in my neighborhood here in Orlando, Florida. And I have a great treat today. I have someone who is a personal hero of mine for what she was able to go through in her pursuit of her freedom and her constitutional rights. And she has been victorious. And she's here from Mount Dora. Her name is Nancy Nemhauser. And she's been all over the media, folks. She's been on Today and CNN and Fox News, all the major stories because of what she had to go through in the city council. Now, can you imagine? I think in America, you should have the right to paint your house whatever you'd like. And, you know, I know there's HOAs, but if you're not in an HOA, you should be able to have the freedom as long as you're following the codes and trying to do what is pleasing to the law of the land. But unfortunately, in this day, there's people who they just get so caught up in power hunger that they take advantage of people, and they take advantage of people who want to be different. And on A Neighbor's Choice, we're all about highlighting neighbors just like you who say, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to stand up for my freedom. I'm not going to cave into fear because I'm on the right side of history. So, Nancy, thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, just for those who have not heard, Nancy, she lives in Mount Dora, and she decided to paint her house, beautiful house, in the style of Vincent van Gogh, in a Starry Night, which is a famous painting, beautiful painting. And I think you did a good job.
Well, thank you. Initially, however, we had planned to just paint the wall, and I had asked for permission, gotten permission, and told that there were no permitting requirements and that there were no restrictions on what we could paint. We painted the wall, and when we began, we were cited with a code violation for graffiti. And I was told that the wall had to match the house. And that's when we decided, okay, if the wall has to match the house, let's paint the house.
Okay.
And our artist worked diligently in the heat of summer to get the house to match the wall. And when we got to the first hearing that the city brought against us, they did drop the graffiti claim and then said our house was a sign. S-I-G-N.
Okay, and now it doesn't look like a sign to me. It's a piece of art, and it's a good replication of the Vincent van Gogh painting. And I'm also joined here with Jeremy Talcott with Pacific Legal Foundation. Jeremy and Pacific Legal, they helped you with fighting against this unjust action by the City Council of Mount Dora.
Oh, big time. They helped us phenomenally. We wouldn't be here where we are today had it not been for Jeremy and the Pacific Legal Foundation team.
So, Jeremy, can you tell us why you chose this story?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, David. And, really as soon as I got the call from Nancy and she described what was going on, it just instantly appealed to us because it was both an issue of, what should you be allowed to do with your private property, which is something that Pacific Legal cares very deeply about, but also how should you be able to express yourself, and how should, what sort of limits should government be able to place on your right to express yourself? So the fact that it really touched both of those things instantly made it intriguing to me, and also just the fact that it was pretty clear to me from the first time Nancy described what was going on that it was some actors in government kind of picking on someone because of a message or a piece of art they just didn't like. And that's just fundamentally unfair.
Yeah, I call that the petty banality of evil and wrongdoing. And, of course, things are not black and white. People have good intentions here mixed in with bad. But we just can't allow our country to lose its constitutional freedoms, the freedom of property, the freedom of expression. And, Pacific Legal Foundation, the website, pacificlegal.org, if you want to see what they're doing, they are helping a lot of people for free speech and all kinds of personhood principles that we should all get behind here. But I wanted to go back to Nancy. Now, can you tell us, why did you want to paint the Vincent van Gogh? You had a story about that with your family.
Yes. My husband, Lubeck, and I have a son who has autism, and he is particularly captivated by Vincent van Gogh's work, and especially Starry Night. So that was the reason why we had begun it. And he has a tendency to elope, and his language is impaired as a result of his autism. When he is frightened or alarmed, for example, if he were to elope and someone stopped him, police or a stranger, he might be unable to speak as well as he might be with us.
Sure.
So we hoped he would be able to say, take me to the Starry Night house or take me to the Van Gogh house.
Right.
And he's learned both of those, and actually he independently now calls it the Starry Night house. So that is great. Yes.
Yeah, very good. And you said he really enjoys the painting. It calms him. And
it is very calming for him. It's relaxing. He will go out onto the balcony and just look at the art. When we pull into the driveway, he's looking forward to it. If we're out and he wants to go home, he'll say, take me to the Van Gogh house. And that's his way of expressing himself. And we're very grateful to have had that opportunity. And in addition, my husband is from Poland. He was raised behind the Iron Curtain.
Okay.
And he takes his constitutional rights very seriously. He worked very hard for them. He worked for 10 years to become a United States citizen, a proud United States citizen. And he paid, he said, nearly a year's salary to achieve that. So he was unwilling to give up his constitutional rights, and he said he was willing to lose the house in order to make that point.
And I think in the land of the free, here it is, 2018 AD, that a mother and a father should be able to love their child and give them the comfort and protection they need on their own property. That's a basic, essential human freedom. And we should take that very precious. We should not be flippant with that freedom. And I'm glad, for one, am glad that you stood your ground and went all through this ordeal. You've been under a lot. I mean, you told me your health has been hurt and other people have had a really hard time, because it's hard to deal with bullies, especially when the government just comes on you with this relentless group think for, oh, you can't paint your house like Vincent van Gogh's painting. But if you want to join in and ask a question, you can do it at 407-916-5400. That's 407-916-5400. I'm speaking here with Nancy Nemhauser and Jeremy Takeout at the Pacific Legal Foundation, discussing how they were able to resist through a very wonderful, it was a very hard process, but a very wonderful outcome, because
Indeed.
You guys are victorious as of So take us, what were they going to threaten you with here?
Well, they put a lien on our home, and they fined us $100 a day up to the value of the house. And Jeremy's firm filed a federal suit and quickly filed a motion for a temporary restraining order, and they achieved that temporary restraining order. And that was the beginning of a much better situation. Jeremy, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Nancy said, we asked for a temporary restraining order to stop those daily mounting fines, which were raising at $100 a day, and that was granted the very next day by the judge, which stopped those fines and gave us the breathing room to go forward and pursue the lawsuit without the worry of, even though Lubeck was willing to lose the house if necessary, we wanted, of course, to try and avoid that.
So, folks, when I think about, give me a piece of advice here. This is for the radio audience. If I am an individual and I live in a neighborhood and there's no HOA and it's just a place where I can express myself, and if I see my neighbor has a house and they've painted it in a way that I don't like, I just don't like it, do you think it's right for me as a person to go to their house and demand that they pay me money or I'll steal it from them as a punishment until they change their house color to meet something that I particularly like? I find that so ridiculous and so absurd, and I think you do too. And I'm so glad, Nancy, that you stood through and you were victorious. So they're putting all these fines. They tell you it's graffiti at first. Then they realize that's not going to work to mask their pettiness.
Right.
And so they change it to, it's a sign. It's advertising. Right. But now you told me before that when you painted this beautiful paint, where you had this artist paint it, you told him don't sign your name so there's no case that you're trying to advertise.
That is absolutely correct. There is no signage on it at all. It is purely art. He has not, our artist Richard Barenechea has not signed it because we didn't want to have a problem with that. So the fact that they called it a sign was, we felt that they were grasping at straws, and they subsequently said it was a safety hazard. If it had been such a safety hazard, why would they have completely given in?
Right.
Because it's no less or more than a safety hazard than it was 2 weeks ago. But now they're fine with it, it seems, and I think it's because they realize that Pacific Legal was not going to let them get away with it.
Well, very good. And Jeremy, I appreciate what you're doing. Have you ever heard of a situation similar to this and other cases that you have dealt with at Pacific Legal Foundation?
Well, this was a very unique and interesting situation because, as I mentioned, it wasn't just a paint job or kind of your typical aesthetic ordinances that was being used. It was a piece of art. So that was actually a little bit unique, but it's certainly not something that hasn't been seen elsewhere, which is oftentimes people can disagree about what is art, and there have certainly been some instances, even in Florida that I can think of people who have put structures on their lawn, things like that, and say it's art, and city officials disagree. So it can certainly be a kind of, as I said, an interesting situation where free speech and property rights kind of overlap. But I think a question everyone should ask themselves is, do we really want government making the call of what qualifies as art or not art on our private property?
Right. I just find that it seems so petty. And I think it's just, again, a product of groupthink. When you get locked up in, I'm in the ritual of city council, I'm the one who, I can tell people what I want to do. It gets to the power trip. It gets a really ridiculous power trip, and I think it never really turns out well.
This was clearly an abuse of power by the city, and I'm so glad that we prevailed, because to have it happen to our neighbors and community would be dreadful for them to have to go through what we've gone through. So I'm hoping that they will rethink their position in the future and treat their citizens more judiciously and carefully.
And I think we can avoid all this if we take lessons of principles that we can apply to say, if someone has not harmed anyone. Now, of course, if you sign a contract, which you did not in this case here in Mount Dora with the Starry Night house, if you sign a contract, you need to abide by the terms that you voluntarily agreed to. But if you're just minding your own business and you're not harming anybody, you're not threatening anybody, you're not trying to defraud anyone, you're not stealing, you're not trying to assault or anything violent, you should be left alone. And when we get around that principle and we start applying it to all these different issues, it'll make our lives a lot simpler, and we can all kind of get along a little bit the way we should be as neighbors, not as, picking fights over stuff. They're so petty.
Indeed.
So I think that your story is a testament to the power of freedom. And I think it's a testament to people standing up for what is right, no matter what City Hall wants to say. And we'll be right back here. We've got a lot more to talk about, and I'm so glad Nancy Nemhauser is in the house with us. She's from Mount Dora, and she was victorious in being able to express herself in her house. We'll be right back on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. You're listening to A Neighbor's Choice Radio. We'll be right back.